Welcome to the next installment of the Wine Club. We're here this morning on a beautiful Finger Lakes morning to give you guys a little bit more insight into the wines we have coming up in your next installment. We are going to be running with the 2013 Dry Riesling Reserve, the 2018 Circle Riesling. We will also have the 2013 Curry Creek Vineyards Gewürztraminer and the 2013 Sawmill Creek Vineyards Gewürztraminer. For reds, we're focusing this installment on the 2018 Cabernet Franc and the 2015 Merlot from Glacier Ridge Vineyards. We're really excited to bring these wines to you, and we're going to be tasting them in pairs today, as they're fairly complementary that way. We hope that you enjoy, and we're going to start with Heather.
Hi everybody. The wine that I chose for this club selection is the 2013 Dry Riesling Reserve. So 2013, let's see what we've got. Smells delicious. And so Megs, when we're making this wine, what's actually the kind of thought process behind making a Dry Riesling Reserve? Because as we all know, everybody has different ways of defining reserve.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the last vintages of Reserve Riesling we did. We really kind of switched gears and focused more into the single vineyards as years went by. But when we were doing a Reserve Riesling, we were looking at something that really kind of had a little bit more relation to the vintage itself rather than just an individual vineyard plot. And something that was going to represent, like I said, the vintage, and also just a little bit of like what we envisioned that vintage to be for a Reserve Riesling. Always dry for the Reserve Rieslings, and usually just a blend of like 2 or 3 different tanks.
I'm super excited to introduce you guys to the 2018 Circle Label Riesling. Circle Label has really become a flagship Riesling for us. It's a great wine, easy to drink, almost too easy. Really exciting fruit characteristics coming through this. Nice tropical notes, nice acidity.
Terry's really loving it over here.
Yeah, I know. I'm having trouble with my dribble glass.
It's a little bit mouth-watering.
Probably not something I should be drinking in the morning.
And oftentimes, as you find a lot with some of our sweeter style Rieslings, like it does have a lot of those juicy fruits to it, but it doesn't come across as cloyingly sweet. It still has a nice crisp finish to it. Alright, so the next wine we're featuring is the one that I got the pairing for, and that is the 2013 Curry Creek Gewürztraminer. And as always, Gewürztraminer leaping out of the grass, really expressive. This particular Gewürztraminer for me has a lot of that really intense kind of lychee character to it, a little bit of like a coriander, black pepper, orange spice on the finish, and really balanced palate. There's not a lot of sugar to it, but it does have this really great coating flavor.
Just so delicate, and I don't know, I don't want to call it plump because that sounds not delicate, but it's plump and juicy, and that lychee just leaps all over my palate.
And what I really like about these particular styles of Gewürztraminer is they are pushing a little bit more into kind of that oily, more viscous style. They're not like kind of light, lousy Gewürztraminers, but that also means their aging potential is extreme. I don't think we've hit the peak on this wine by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it has a long ways to go, and I'm looking forward to tasting this Sawmill Creek. Now these vineyards are what, 1.5 miles apart? Different terrain, different soils, but both right in our backyards.
Yeah, and the fruit's treated pretty similarly when it comes in. So really what we're seeing difference-wise is just the vineyards themselves kind of speaking to us.
Yeah, the Sawmill is similar sort of balance, really nice and coating and viscous. Not quite as much of the pure lychee fruit, but there's an aspect of minerality in this wine and tightness that maybe goes along with that Sawmill site in general.
Yeah. The tiny bit of sugar in the Sawmill Creek is integrated really nicely and gives it almost this lush feel without being overly sweet by any means.
Sawmill Creek Gewürztraminer is always a little bit more on the structured side. I think Curry Creek we can really lean into a little bit more of that weight, that plushness, whereas the Sawmill, even with a similar sugar level, like I think we're all responding, there's like a mineral quality to it, a real like pleasant, almost maybe a little bit of bitterness that's actually appropriate for this wine that's helping balance it out nicely.
I've always loved the way that these two vineyards express themselves in slightly different ways, because while they're from the same variety and from the same vintage, it's always interesting to see how the individual characteristics manifest themselves once it's been bottled.
The Curry Creek just seems to have a little bit more petrol in the nose.
Dave, as someone who's worked with these two sites with Gewürztraminer for certainly longer than I've had experience with them. How do these track with how these two sites usually performed as vintages or as wines?
Yeah, these we've worked with these two sites for quite a while, starting with the Curry Creek Vineyard site, and then a couple of years later the Sawmill, because it was planted later. But they were both planted back, 15 years ago now. And the Curry Creek consistently seems to have a different kind of weight and intensity than the Sawmill site. Yeah, so the Curry Creek site is on Dunkirk soils, relatively level, just gently sloping. Sawmill Creek is on that last slope heading off to the lake, so it gets a lot of afternoon sun. I'm not sure exactly how those different characteristics impact the wine, but it definitely sets a different stage for different styles.
I think what helps too with Gewürztraminer, especially how we treat it at Red Newt, is we're not afraid of having those higher sugar levels because it's all about getting that full flavor ripeness. So just word of warning, there is always a little bit more alcohol to these than like your average Riesling from Red Newt. So just, maybe a little bit less of a glass.
Yeah, that aspect of alcohol with Gewürz is really important. And not so much because Gewürz needs to have more alcohol to express itself, but because often Gewürz needs more time in the vineyard to develop flavor. And the longer it spends in the vineyard, well, the more sugar it accumulates. And there's always a balance in the decision to be made of how soon to pick the Gewürztraminer. And it's often before, it could get a lot sweeter in the vineyard. Flavors and sugar develop independently in the vineyard. And our goal is to find the place where they best intersect and pick them. And often it's with ample sugar and ample alcohol in the wine.
So Gewürztraminer is generally picked later in the harvest cycle, like towards the end?
Actually comes early in the harvest cycle, but relative to the ripening curve of Gewürztraminer, which is a little more accelerated, it comes late in that curve, but it would still usually come in before any Riesling for us or any Cabernet Franc or Merlot. Yep, it puts on sugar at a rapid rate, and a rate which, to the detriment of us working on the crush pad, attracts yellow jackets in no short order.
Right.
The next wine in your wine club selection is the 2018 vintage of Cabernet Franc. This is one of our favorite wines to make here at Red Newt, and one of our favorite wines, I think, to enjoy year-round, which people don't often think of with red. They think of it more as a winter wine or maybe an autumn wine. But Cabernet Franc in general is a four-season wine, and the way that we work with this one in particular really lends itself to that expression. In summer, like we're in now, a little bit chill on it is just fine. Is actually maybe enhances it a little bit. And what we're looking for in this wine is this beautiful garnet color, really bright fruit, and because it gets made in stainless steel instead of oak, you get some really nice freshness to the wine as well. It's not a heavy wine. It's really a wine that's meant to pair with fattier foods, sausages, or anything along those lines, and does so beautifully.
Yeah. I think one of the things I like so much about this particular style of Cabernet Franc too is as you were saying, it's got that freshness to it. And Cabernet Franc always has a nice little bit of acid that falls through with it. And so when I'm thinking of like summertime reds, I'm also thinking of dishes that like, one, will go with the barbecue, but two, so many tomatoes are coming in right now. There's a lot of acid that goes with this, and I think this Cabernet Franc can stand up and kind of maintain its freshness up against like the acidity of tomatoes.
So this is the 2015 Merlot from Glacier Ridge Vineyards. And compared to the Cab Franc, it's quite, it's much darker. I tasted it last night and was testing out a recipe with it. And I have been experimenting with a molten lava cake. My initial attempts were not complete failures, but I do need to tweak it a little bit. I don't know, chocolate's just been a focus of mine lately.
Glacier Ridge is always such a distinct vineyard site. I mean, there's always a smokiness to it. I think, and especially in this duo, going from the Cabernet Franc, which is so fresh and kind of like light on its feet, the oak components are really beautiful and integrated. But like there's some nice vanilla and smoke from the oak as well that complements the wine.
And 2015 was an interesting vintage to work with. We were coming off one of the super cold winters, so there was actually a little bit less fruit on the vines, and kind of what I think ended up happening, especially with this Merlot, is there's just a little bit more concentration and power behind the red as well, and it showcases nicely and translates well into the glass.
So that kind of wraps up our tasting for you this morning. We're really excited to bring these wines to you. We're very happy about how they're pairing with food. We're very excited to bring you our recipes, and we know you will enjoy all of these wines.